Thank you for having me. I do feel like I might have stepped into the place that I've been looking for a long time, having listened to the previous presentations, particularly having spent yesterday down in Westbury looking at the massive S&C renewal that's going to take place over Christmas. So very excited to be here. Bex and Gareth have just talked you through kind of strategic level sustainability, and what I'm hopefully going to show you is how within Root Services SEO we actually go about implementing this, and that by working collaboratively together to create that kind of systems approach that we can achieve the carbon savings, the circular economy, materials reuse that we need to drive. And I'm going to focus on used ballast and track excavation waste, but I also work across the whole range of things that SEO do. So just briefly, who am I? Who's my team? So we provide support, technical guidance, advice. We help create processes, legal compliance, develop best practice. And we support the operational teams, the SEO regional delivery teams, but also the trackbed design team within engineering services, who we work very closely with. And essentially we sit, as you can see, in Root Services, but specifically within supply chain operations. And I've just spotted Levente. Hello. If you take nothing else away today from what I'm going to say in the next 20 minutes or so, it is this slide. So if you would like to achieve maximum recycling of track excavation waste for minimum cost on your track renewals project, come and talk to SEO, because that is what we're all about delivering for you. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of information that shows how that is going to achieve simpler, better, greener. So, key outputs from the work that we're doing collaboratively across, and potentially for many of you, I've already spoken to people within your teams, is that we're all about not just reducing waste to landfill, but identifying options that add value and manage risk, and to plan for waste to make sure that we're legally compliant, but also looking at things like improving wagon turnaround time, so improving the efficiency of those logistics, identifying cost and time efficiencies across the delivery of the track renewals project, and taking a risk-based approach. So starting with our standards and saying this is the blanket approach, but then getting into the details of what you're looking to deliver and looking for how do we manage it on a risk-based approach to achieve those efficiencies. And ultimately, therefore, delivering simpler, better, greener in a really tangible way. So this is the standard that covers this particular bit of work. It's the 044 standard. And Eric and myself and Emily from Technical Authority are currently going through the process of refreshing this standard. So there will be a new version coming out. And we're looking to make improvements to that standard to make it easier to follow, more efficient to use, and ultimately the connection that also having networked a bit and met Darren from SEO, link it into the Track 8100 standard. So if we can start to manage our waste better and get that asset that is still in that track waste out of it, we can feed that into a blended ballast recycled product that can go back into the track, and we truly create that circular economy. And as I've just mentioned to Gareth, TIU are one of the first who are going to be using that product. So we're very excited to see that, and obviously the carbon reductions that come with that, but also the reduction in us losing that good quality aggregate out into secondary aggregate markets and instead retaining that asset within Network Rail. So the standard itself, and I promise this is my most wordy slide, this is how the standard sets it out, is that it's a process to be followed to identify what waste is there and whether it is hazardous or non-hazardous. And if it starts off with a risk assessment, And if there is a risk, then the trackbed team will be able to organise to undertake sampling, have lab analysis done, and then there's a process that I support there to actually classify the waste. And it gives it a waste classification that is then booked onto Enroll with the number and type of wagons that are going to be carrying hazardous waste or non-hazardous, and the appropriate commodity code that goes with that. And then if it's hazardous, SEO produce a consignment note for it as well. We've introduced DocuSign so that it's a much more efficient electronic version rather than the days of paper copies, which we definitely never used to get back. They never used to make it from whichever train driver took the train out of the work site all the way back to our site. So it's been a real benefit to introduce the electronic DocuSign. And once the waste has been loaded into the engineering train, then it's sent to the correct aggregate handling depot for recycling, and we're able to process that waste. That's how it's supposed to go. This is what we actually get. And as you might imagine, it's not just used track ballast. So the challenge for us is dealing with those unexpected wastes. And it can be anything from terram, bits of drainage piping, to a lovely bit of tarmac, and everybody's favourite, asbestos-containing material. That is a big challenge for us in SEO, to manage that waste and make sure that we can keep those wagons being unloaded and turned back around, and that we manage that waste out and try to avoid landfill. But it's also a problem for the people who are delivering that work, because it costs, and it costs big. So I've started back with the 2019-20 figures, because that's when we really started to unpick this. So myself and a number of colleagues across SEO, from the SEO waste team, the SEO supply chain services team, really started to look at the spend. And we realised that actually, not only were we having this risk of unexpected waste that we were having to manage, but we were also having these high costs. And that all starts way back at the design and planning stage. So it's absolutely what everyone's been talking about, is that we have to look at this from a systematic point of view. There's a standard called the 015, EMV 015 standard, that says that every project, capital delivery project, needs to do a designing out waste workshop or a sustainability design workshop. That's the point that these decisions should be being made. But in reality, what mostly happens is they go, oh, well, it's track excavation waste, that'll go in the SEO wagons, that's off, so we'll focus on the other wastes. And that's where we can really help as SEO. So we are the specialists in following the 044 standard that is linked to this track excavation waste. But we're also waste specialists, and so we can help at looking at those problem wastes, the asbestos-containing material, the track waste that's got asbestos fibres in, invasive species, tarmac, you name it, we can have that conversation, and we can develop good options for waste management based on site specifics. So developing that risk-based approach. And again, something that we've been doing on TIU around invasive species that has reduced significantly the amount of track waste that would be going to landfill. We're able to have those conversations, develop those options, and we can deliver services by rail or road. The SEO regional delivery team are your start point for that. So you'll be familiar with our SEO regional delivery directors and their route logistics managers. But then there's also the SEO waste team who sit in our organisation. They literally are seowaste@networkrail.co.uk. Very easy to contact. It's easy to start the conversation with us, and you don't need to have any technical expertise in waste. That's what we're here to do. So I'm going to run through just a few case studies just to give you an example and the kind of things that we can do. These are based on real projects that have happened. So, for example, this one we had at Bleeding Wolf at Hale, Himalayan balsam. and it was identified within the worksite area, and there's normally a standard exclusion zone, that anything within that area, if you're digging it out, it gets landfilled as being contaminated with an invasive species. However, we were able to take this risk-based approach and identify that actually Himalayan balsam, as it goes, pretty weedy for an invasive plant, and the seeds that it produces don't survive our processes. So we were able to reduce down the amount of tonnage that was going to end up being disposed of, and that had a cost saving. So it had already been budgeted that this waste was going to have to be disposed of, and so this was an actual cost saving on that. It was all planned in advance. We knew those wagons were coming. We therefore had all our setup ready to go, and so there was no issues with the logistics. Turnaround time was just as quick as it would have been if we hadn't have done that additional work. Second one, Japanese knotweed, bit more of a tough one. And this one, again, recycling at Trafford Park, had already identified the dig area and that they had Japanese knotweed within that. And actually by working with the project, they were able to go back and look at the design and challenge, did they really need to dig out that exact footprint? And they were able to make a change to their design that therefore meant they got less waste that needed to be handled and needed to be disposed of. And we were able to save 2,000 tonnes from going to landfill, save the project around about 350,000 that, again, they had already budgeted for because they knew they had the Japanese knotweed. So by putting that risk-based approach in, we achieved that cost saving. Cradley Heath, Smethwick, this is a particular favourite of mine. This was a works delivery job. So what I'd class as my off-track work, where anything and everything is buried on the sides of the railway. And this particular job was a regrading of an embankment that was facing away from the railway for a housing development. And there was evidence of asbestos sheeting there. Interestingly, when I looked on Google Maps Street View, the building that had been knocked down prior to the housing development had an asbestos roof. I'm just suggesting we might know where that came from. So we had to have the asbestos sheeting removed, which was fine. We organised for our framework supplier through SCO to come along. They're a licensed asbestos removal contractor, remove the asbestos sheeting. But then in the ground sampling that was done, there was a really high iron reading identified that was going to mean that all of the waste would have to go as hazardous waste. However, the area was next to an old colliery and a foundry works. And by looking at it, talking to the project, I worked with them to design and deliver an enhanced sampling plan. We used the Chatbed investigation team, the framework supply that they have, to be able to take those samples and have them analysed. And what I was able to demonstrate is that actually that iron was naturally occurring. And so there was no need to dispose of it as hazardous. So we were able to use our technical knowledge to support that team in delivering and save them around 60,000 on a fairly straightforward works delivery job. This is my one where it did go a little bit wrong. And this is just to kind of prove the point, I guess, that back before we started this work, it was really common that we would just have wagons arrive at one of our waste sites. And it was just, we don't know where it's come from, we don't know what's in it, we're expecting track ballast, let's start unloading it. And unfortunately, we found asbestos-containing material. It wasn't planned, we had no prior information. And so we had to dispose of over 2,700 tonnes of track excavation waste to landfill, and at cost. So it cost the projects an extra 368,000 that they weren't expecting. This is where I liken it to, if you book a plumber to come and service your boiler, and it's a weekday and you've booked it a couple of months in advance, they come along with the kit that they're expecting to use to do that service, and they charge you the fair rate, and it's all fine and good. If, however, you ring that same plumber at 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning for an emergency call out, you don't know what's wrong, so they show up but they haven't got the right kit or they haven't got the parts they need, so they've got to go off and get them and come back, and all of that is done. It's all possible, it's all delivered, but you pay 3, 4 times the price that you would from your weekday planned-in service. And it's the same in waste. We can take whatever you send us and we can manage it. If we know about it and can plan for it, it will be at the lowest cost. If it happens unplanned, we kick into emergency procedures and we start to see that cost rising. When I followed up with the project, there were actually some points at which, during the risk assessment process, it should have been identified that there was a risk that that asbestos-containing material was there. And so what I'm doing at the moment is pushing back and getting projects to look again at buried services plans, at track bed investigation documents, all of which come through SEO and provide fantastic amounts of information. They are so worth spending time and money on up front, because what you might see in spending 3 to 5 grand more on a slightly more involved track bed investigation, you will see that at least cost avoid you 10 times, but usually 100 times, because we usually deal in sets of wagons. 20 wagons, 1,200 tonnes, gives you that usual 350k. And to really make that point, my final one is Barrow-in-Furness, which happened recently. And these pictures are just to show you that we've got on the left-hand side what the waste looked like in the core samples when they were taken as part of the track bed investigation. And then what we've got is what it looked like when it arrived in a wagon at our depot. This one actually arrived and we hadn't seen the TBI. And the waste manager at our site said, "Ooh, that's black, it's quite smelly. I think it might be oil," and quarantine the wagon. I was able to go to the project and say, "Please give me the TBI." I looked into the TBI and I was like, okay, I can see it's not actually oil, that's actually organic matter, which again, it's made up of carbons, it breaks down in the same way, so it does produce that black content, it does produce a smell, but it doesn't make it hazardous. And so we were able to say, okay, we can deal with that waste as non-hazardous, and that created a cost avoidance. So the project had never planned on having hazardous waste, but if we'd have dealt with it as that because we suspected it was oil, it would have cost them an additional 100k. I can't emphasize enough the power of the information that is already in your hands. You will have already got that information through going through the various stages of design and planning. And it's about following that through and bringing it to SEO and saying, right, I've got this waste, how can you help me? And you don't need to be an experienced waste manager or know anything really about waste to have that conversation. You only need to be able to say, does it look like track ballast or does it look like something else? If it looks like something else, like this, come and have a conversation with us and we'll make that plan. So if you're doing a plain line track renewal and you're only digging to about 250 mil and it's not that degraded, it's probably going to look like track ballast and you'll be fine. If it goes deeper or it's more complex or you're going anywhere outside of the standard 4-foot track layout, so you might be digging some cess, line side, bit of old platform, even the pathway that goes down the side that the signaller uses that might have tarmac in it, then those are the times to come and talk to us, because we really can connect these dots then, and we can on the ground deliver services that achieve you efficiency, cost avoidance or cost saving, but they also contribute to those carbon targets, that circular economy targets, your waste targets for reducing and recycling. So I'll finish off by saying I've added in the slide here of the regional delivery team contacts. These are the regional delivery directors. I mentioned before about the SEO waste email, and we also have for other materials the various websites that you can go to through the how to buy pages. SEO is absolutely here to deliver for you, and not just in terms of we can provide logistics services, that holistic view of delivering a sustainable railway fit for the future. I know for some of you, I will see you again in December because I've also been invited to the track delivery group. And what I really want to move on to there, like where are we going next, is how do we take what I've shown you today, where we're planning for that track excavation waste management, and feed that into creating the recycled blended ballast product, and for you to use that back into your projects to really achieve that circular economy and all of the benefits that can come with that. So I will finish there for today. Thank you very much.